You sure do got a purty mouth. Why you guys won't go around fucking with that river? 'Cause it's there. Welcome back to Ty and That Guy for a down south version of our podcast. What are we discussing today, Ty?
Well, I think it's funny because last week when you weren't around, Daniel and I got like super philosophical. And talked about, creative challenges and how to overcome them and sort of the philosophy of becoming a creative person. And today we're talking about straight
butt stuff.
Butt stuff. And by backwoods hillbillies. Yeah. So really we're in two weeks we're going to do the entire range of topics that this podcast covers, from the deep and intellectual to the sexual butt stuff, to all of the possibilities in between.
Bar that you could have is with me. So from that, Daniel's the highest in the intellectual side, and then you go down to the lowest, to the toilet bowl side. And yes. I'm happy that it represents something. But what movie are we talking about today?
I mean, if everybody doesn't know about the down south butt stuff reference, I'm shocked that they're spending any time listening to our crap.
Let me tell you something, Ty. The world is changing. I'm working with some younger folks. Well, at least I was working with them yesterday. And, one of the things that I love about movie sets is like you can just use film language to be a shortcut to what you're trying to explain, or even like the humor on the set. But there was a younger generation, crew-wise, and some of the cast. And I made some reference to Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, to a few horror movies, even The Breakfast Club. Just like in the sense of like, oh yeah, it's like this time and crickets. There was no... They were like, oh, I think I've heard of that movie. And I'm like, fucking Planes, Trains, and Automobiles? What made you want to be an actor if you never fucking even know of these movies? Yeah,
that's like people of our generation not knowing Casablanca.
Well, we knew Casablanca.
I know, that's what I'm saying.
Oh, I see. Yeah, I get the point, yeah. Yeah, now I understand.
You got to have some sense of film history.
Yeah, you have to have some film history. When you and I are on set, even when I was 22, they could talk about Casablanca or any of the Sergio Leone westerns or Citizen Kane or anything, and we knew what they were talking about. But I feel like that there is a disconnect. I think it's more of the TikTok let's be seen generation that sees film and TV as a vehicle to be seen, as opposed to like a craft and an art and storytelling. Anyway, I don't want to go this direction. So what are we talking about today?
We're talking about how shitty the current generation of young people are, and how they have no sense of history and no respect for the giants that created the craft they work in. I mean, that's what we're talking about. And also butt stuff.
And butt stuff.
And the most manly leather vest ever put on film. If you put that leather vest on and no shirt and walk around, everybody you walk past is pregnant. And it doesn't matter what gender they are.
Right.
They're just pregnant.
Right.
Yep.
And it sucks when you're a man because you don't have anywhere for the baby to go, but you are pregnant every time you walk past
You are pregnant.
Yeah.
Because that vest is made out of like solidified testosterone.
Chuck Norris semen. And it's Chuck Norris semen and Bruce Willis saliva weaving together,
and pieces of Mr. T's mohawk.
Did we ever say the movie?
If people don't know by now, it is the 70s classic Deliverance about Burt Reynolds and his hairy chest stuffed into the manliest vest ever, cruising down the waterways of your old hometown, right? That's your country.
That is my country. That I hail from that part of the world.
Running into some of your relatives.
Running into some of my relatives. And, so this movie fascinates me because I am interested endlessly interested in this movie. I think it's so powerful, but I don't know if I like it. I don't know if I enjoy it. It's a horror movie. I think it's a horror movie. And it
is a horror movie.
Some people describe it differently, but I think it's straight up horror movie. And I think it's like the beginning of that kind of genre, that I think that people have done a lot lesser versions of, like, they call it like hillbilly horror or whatever. But the thing is like they say that it kicked off that genre. But I think, would you say that Texas Chainsaw Massacre would still exist if Deliverance wasn't made? Or do you think it is inspired by Deliverance?
I honestly don't know if I can answer that question, because I know the filmmakers have always said that they were mostly inspired by Ed Gein.
Well, because so my thing is, I think like the popular narrative is that Deliverance kind of kicked off the hillbilly horror. And then, the next most important one is Texas Chainsaw Massacre. But I disagree. I think that maybe I disagree. I think that Deliverance is like a hillbilly horror art film, in that Texas Chainsaw Massacre is a hillbilly horror, like, campy film. And I think Texas Chainsaw Massacre is really what spawned that direction, right? And Deliverance is kind of in a class by itself. It's something that doesn't really, I don't think, I mean, there's other movies that have been really inspired by it, and the canoe and the rafting and the psycho and the thing and like that. But this is a movie that exists on its own plane. I mean, John Borman, who directed the movie. A lot of his movies it's his essence that is not really replicated. It's not like other things that I've seen before.
Well, and part of why we're talking about this movie is because we were having a conversation about Borman, because we were talking about Zardoz,
right?
Which,
like, you can't get more. Yeah, go ahead.
How could you get any different, right? I mean, if anybody who can draw a straight line from Deliverance to Zardoz is super high on acid at the time,
right?
Because there is no straight line between those two movies,
right? So I read the book about a year ago. And then I just recently watched the movie again. But one of the things that Borman does so well, which I think some people mess up, is like the casting of actual locals within the movie.
Yeah.
And he uses them really well. So they're not really carrying dramatic weight, but their presence is telling a story. And so, like if we think of the setup of this, I think it's a perfect shortcut of exposition, right? Because you got their conversation over images of the river, of them setting up the trip, of them getting ready. And so you get a sense of who everybody is, what their point of view. You get that. And it's also funny to me, like, these guys are the city slickers, and for the world standards, they're still a bit like country, like they're still from Atlanta in the 70s, and they still got those Jimmy Carter accents,
No, they're country boys in the way we think of country boys.
Yeah.
But then they run into the actual country boys.
There's another level of country boys.
There's another level.
And and one of the things that, so, when they enter the world, so the exposition in their conversation gives you a sense of where they're coming from. And so they immediately start off in the middle of the journey, right? And so they're in this world, and we get to meet a lot. It's all locals, all populated with locals. And it's so authentic, the way they talk, the way they behave, and their presence. So the most powerful scene in the beginning is the dueling banjo scenes, right?
And probably, I think, the most famous scene in the movie.
Yes.
The dueling banjos.
And what's fascinating about that scene is there is I don't know where they found this kid, but there's a kid who probably has some questionable genetics intermingling, like up path of when he came into this world. There might be some blood on blood connection, or at least it tells that story. But this kid has such a mysterious look, and what is fascinating about him is that he is a master of the banjo. He's like a savant.
Oh yeah,
in the banjo. And so what he represents is the threshold into the bizarre. A threshold into a world that they don't understand. And there's a bit of the arrogance of comfort, right, that they're coming from. There's the arrogance of comfort and success, and they're going into this world. And it reminds me a lot of guys that are like warmongers that have never even really been in a fight before, that are
right.
And that kind of rah like, let's go until they actually see war and they see the reality of it. And I see these guys of like, we're going to go conquer nature. We're going to go conquer the river. Ned Beatty even says early on, he goes, I think we beat those rafters. And Burt Reynolds like, you don't beat this river, you survive it. And so there's a little bit of like man versus nature element to it.
And not without some basis for it. I mean, the Burt Reynolds character is the classic manly man, right? He's got the vest, he's got the muscly arms, he's got the bow. He's the guy who goes out and hunts on the weekend. He's the guy who, he probably considers himself an outdoorsman, considers himself a hunter and an outdoor guy. So but the difference is there is the civilized guy's version of outdoorsman, which is the guy who lives in a comfortable air-conditioned house in Atlanta, but then on weekends he goes out and he hunts deer with a rifle or with a bow or whatever, right? And so he thinks of himself as an outdoorsman.
Right.
And then there's the people who actually live in the bush.
Yeah.
and that's this other level. And that's, I think, what you're talking about, the comfort of civilization,
right,
is even the guys who think of themselves as tough outdoorsmen, which the Burt Reynolds character is representing, that are now dropped into a world where those people aren't going out in the woods on the weekend for fun. They live out there.
Yeah.
It's, what it always makes me think of is, when people really started doing like real serious movies about Vietnam. And one of the things that they would talk about is the soldiers that came from the US, the kids that were sent out there, like the jungle was like, that was where the battlefield was. For them, and you went into it and fought, and then you came back. The people they were fighting fucking lived there.
Yeah.
Right? That was their home turf.
Right.
So the difference in comfort with the surroundings was part of the reason that it was so hard for the US to make headway on the ground there.
Yeah.
And I think what we're seeing in this movie is that same kind of thing. Is like, Burt Reynolds shows up, he's a badass, he's got the guns, and he's got the bow, and he's ready to kick some ass, and he's going up against people. That's their home territory.
Right.
They live there. That's not like a weekend trip for them.
Yeah.
So you're immediately ceding home territory advantage to them. And we see how that plays out.
What's interesting is that Burt Reynolds in the book is the wealthiest of them all, but he came from wealthy.
Yeah.
And his family owned real estate, and he was a landlord basically of the real estate that he owned. So he was somebody that is seeking these trips. It's like the City Slickers thing where they're trying to find adventure. They're trying to define their manhood, define themselves.
It's the thrill seeking.
The thrill seeking. And what I think's interesting about Lewis's character is he is a weekend warrior, but he does come through in the end, and he does prove that he does have a grit. And I don't want to jump forward, but it could have went the other way. It could have been somebody like that character. A lot of times, once they're really challenged, they don't really have the grit or what they portray or project that they do have, which this was an interesting choice made by this. And Lewis is based off James Dickey, who wrote the book. And James Dickey is a fascinating, and we'll talk about him throughout this whole thing, but he's a fascinating character to me. He's one of the most interesting Southern writers, but he comes from like that Jim Harrison tradition. I think him and Jim Harrison were actually friends, where they go hard in the paint, hard drinkers. They were, he lived in the borderland of the other side, and
right.
he got banned on this set like several times. Like he would show up drunk and insult everybody. He got in a fight with John Borman and broke his nose and knocked his teeth out. And
oh my God.
Yeah, he was fucking a wild man. He tried to pick a fight with Burt Reynolds in the bar, and then Burt Reynolds like stood his ground, and then he just started laughing. He goes, "That's exactly what Lewis would have done." And he was just like, he just fucked with him hardcore. And he was a guy that would go bow hunting, up in the things, whatever, and come back and drinking. But he was a poet. He was mainly a poet. And but he, we talked about this, but he plays that cop at the end. And I think he's a stellar actor, and the duality of his performance and the threaten, and even though he was like, you could feel the nervousness and like him kind of swallowing his words, but it works. He's compelling on screen, and I think those spirit world, real world, one foot in the spirit world people that are when they're on like Brando, when they're on, they're just, you can't take your eyes off him. He's fascinating. I think he was really good in the movie, but that's what this book is about. That's what he wrote, is that he grew up in this city. He highly educated, grew up with advantage, and he resented that, and he didn't want to be that. And so he's going to find rocks that he could sharpen himself on. And that's what these guys are doing. But the rock that they find is more than they can handle. And the savagery is more than handle. And it starts off with a sin against nature. It starts off where this beautiful river, which is actually modeled after a real town in North Georgia, it's shot in North Georgia, but it was actually, there was a river that was flooded, and it broke Dickie's heart, and that's where this came from. But they were going to flood this river and make it to a lake, and then use a dam and harness the power of and all of that stuff. Harnessing the power of nature to make our lives more comfortable. All of those things,
right?
And so, even Lewis uses the language of being raped. That they're raping this river, raping this land. And the people that they encounter is almost like a defense mechanism as the river itself, defending itself against this progress that's coming their way. And one thing that struck me about this is like as soon as they get in the river. Oh, by the way, the one thing that I would say is not accurate, and if you go back and read about this movie, I do think Boorman, who is a British lad, who's a gentleman, I do think he had a certain. He looked down a little bit on the locals and the kind of the culture and the people that he was there. And you can see it in how he depicts them in the movie. And the reality is the most inaccurate scene in this movie is the Griner brothers wanting to get paid to move those cars. I'm going to tell you something about the South. I'm going to tell you something this area. So they would say, hey, I got to move these cars. Don't you worry about it. But they would have loaded those fucking cars up. They would have had them there. They wouldn't have taken money from them. They would have, they bend over backwards to help people. And then you get a glimpse of that at the dinner at the end when they're at dinner and they're feeding them and those people. But yes, there's some bizarreness. Yes, there's some harshness, but Southern politeness and Southern ability to help people out, like that is ingrained in us, and that's in our culture. And that's like the Griner brothers, like that whole thing was like those motherfuckers, even if they're the meanest motherfuckers on the mountain, they would have got them cars come hell or high water to them, and those cars would not have had a scratch on them, and they would not have taken money from them to do that. So Boorman did have a little bit of that, he comes from a class system, and this is definitely the lower end of the caste system in America, and that's how he kind of saw it, and that's how he portrayed it. But the canoe shit on this river, again, we talked about movies when we watched movies, like when we were talking about the William Friedkin movie, The Sorcerer, and we're like, it just feels dangerous. And there could be movies that have way cooler stunts and way more, but it doesn't feel dangerous. Like this one is like the rapids aren't that intense, but they are really going down those rapids. They had no insurance on the actors. Ned Beatty was scared off his ass, and you can see it when the camera's on him. He is like, it's like he's not in character. He's not anything. It's a home movie of Ned Beatty shitting his pants going down the fucking river. And it's so, it is so gripping.
I mean, I think that's part of what makes it good, though.
Oh, that's exactly what makes it good.
You're watching somebody's home movies. Now, I will say, one of the things about Boorman that is, I guess, if you want to call it a straight line between all of his movies, is he is a beautiful visual filmmaker. He really has a great sense of camera. And even on his really weird ass movies, they're beautifully shot. And I think part of what makes Deliverance successful as a movie is his camera work, the way he filmed it. It's a beautiful movie.
The first camp scene after the first rapids they go through, they're surrounded by fire, and Ned Beatty makes a comment of like fucking his mattress or something. And everybody seems to get what, and I still don't understand what that is. I don't understand what he's
talking about. You never fucked your mattress?
I mean, it's an air mattress. He's gonna go fuck his air. What do you think that is?
I have no idea what he's talking about there.
I have no idea, and I really try to pay attention and be like, is he gonna go fuck his mattress? Like what? And everybody seemed to understand. Like, oh, okay, you're gonna. It's almost like he's like, I'm gonna go jerk off.
Was it a joke about jerking off?
It felt like it. It felt. Okay, well, it felt like sexual, and it felt like too much sharing. It was like, we don't need to. That's not funny. I don't. Yeah, you're gonna fuck your mattress.
When you're out camping with your friends, you don't make sure everybody knows when you're about to jerk off. Don't clue everybody in.
It's like that joke, but I'm not gonna tell it on this thing. Burt Reynolds hears something. He goes out into the woods. He circles it back. So then you get a sense of like, okay, Lewis is the leader. He's the one that's going to keep them safe. That's the one. He's the one in the boat, doing the bow and arrow, shooting the fish with the bow and arrow. And he gives that speech that I still hear. I still hear that speech where the machines are going to fail and we're all going to go back to primal living. You got to know how to take care of yourself. You got to grow your food and hunt and all of those things. And, it depends on what day. So there are some days where I'll read something about AI and I'm like, that's it. I'm getting cows and I'm growing farms and, and everything. And then there's days where I'm like, technology is not going away. Like it's not, if it does, we're dead. We're all going to die. If there's a nuclear annihilation and the world is over, then that's when it's over. But, I think we can relax. I think that, we're going to, running water and electricity and TV seems to be here to stay. Don't you think?
Yeah. I mean, if there was some like massive EMP attack globally that disabled all the electronics everywhere in the world all at once, most people would just die. Because most people, if they don't have refrigeration and electricity and stuff, most people are just going to die. But a lot of people wouldn't.
Okay, now we're getting to the scene, and I can't watch it. I can't do it. I can't like.
Oh, it's horrifying.
It's horrifying.
This is the horror scene of the movie,
and I think that this scene is there's something about the way that it's done. You and I love horror movies. We love all kinds of horror movies. We've seen the most horrific scenes or whatever. This one, by far, nothing disturbs me like this scene. And not only does it disturb me, I can't get it out of my head. It disturbs me for a couple of days.
The thing that I do like horror movies, and I like almost every kind of horror movie, and I'm not easily shocked or easily offended. But the one kind of thing that people do in horror movies that I have no use for, that when a movie relies on it for shock value, I just stop watching. And that is sexual violence. Mm-hmm. I've got a hang up about sexual violence. I movies that are based on like, they capture the women and they, what's the famous one? Spit on Your Grave.
Yeah.
About the woman who's like savagely raped and beaten and then gets revenge.
Right.
I can't watch that movie. I can't get past the attack.
Right.
And I know that later she gets her revenge or whatever, but there's something about sexual violence that I do it's not so much that I am shocked by it. It is shocking, but that's not what it is. What it is I don't enjoy it. There's no thrill from it. Like if a guy's chasing another guy with a knife and he's trying to get away, there's something exciting about that. Like if you're imagining being the guy who's being chased, and how would I get away? And what would I do? And even when he gets caught and stabbed, there's still like that bad thing's happening and it's not happening to me. So you get the little endorphin. That's what horror movies do. Give you that endorphin rush of I didn't get killed, but that person did. I don't get that from sexual violence. I don't get any of that sort of thrill or excitement.
Yeah.
I have no prurient interest in it.
Right.
And so when it happens, I just find it unpleasant.
Yeah.
And I don't watch movies for unpleasantness. Now, this scene, it's a very famous scene in film. The thing that made it so famous at the time, and I still think what makes it mean something today, is it's not what you expect, because what we as a society expect is sexual violence happens by men to women.
Yeah.
And watching it happen to a man who is then treated in the way that, like, it's about the humiliation, because it's not just that they like take a man and treat him like he's a woman. They take a man and treat him like he's an animal.
Mm-hmm.
And that level of degradation and humiliation combined with the sexual violence is incredibly uncomfortable to watch. Anybody who enjoys that scene, I think we should have a psychological evaluation. They might need to go to jail.
Exactly. I think that, I look at it like roller coasters sometimes. Like if you watch a horror movie, you get put in roller coasters, they put you in a very dangerous situation. So your lizard brain in that moment is like, I am out of control. This is a dangerous situation.
Yep.
And then you get then you live.
So you get the endorphin rush.
Yeah, you get that nice
and that's what horror movies do.
Yeah, you get that nice slope at the end, and that's what horror movies do. And then I think that people have stolen from this movie, because there is so much power in it. But this movie uses this scene to say something different than like I Spit on Your Grave. I Spit on Your Grave is like exploiting that moment to then have this like revenge. And to me, like people are like, oh man, that movie's rock and roll. I don't think it's rock and roll. I think it's sloppy. I don't think it's good storytelling. I don't think that I don't understand what it's saying about the character, or what kind of statement or whatever it's going to say. And James Dickey wanted to have the most visceral, raw reaction because he feels that's what's happening to the land, right? And so and even how that scene unfolds, because even no matter when I watch that scene, there's always an element of like, it's not going to happen. They're going to get away. They're going to, like, even when I know what's going to happen, there's a moment in that turn. The turn always gets me where, it's kind of random. They're on this high. They just conquered these rapids. They have this nice camp out. They're in the morning. They're laughing. They're joking. They see him. And he's like, "Hey, fellas, how you doing?" They're coming out of the woods, and it starts to just have a presence of eeriness. And then when he touches his face, and then you're like, "Wait, that's not what's." And then as it just progresses, it's psychologically traumatizing to see that scene.
Oh yeah,
and the reason the scene is done right is because it doesn't slingshot you into wanting revenge. What it does is you just feel sad, and you then at that point it's just like it's about survival. It's not about the cathartic thing of revenge. It's about, like, at the end of this movie, you feel there's no slingshot back up, right? You just feel just sad, and when Ned Beatty's like, I don't think we're going to be seeing each other again, for a while, you're like, yeah, you're not going to see each other again, and you're going to have some serious issues with this, and I hope you don't kill yourself.
Oh, you need to go to a doctor.
Yeah, you need to go to a doctor. So I can't watch that scene anymore. In this movie, I was like, I can't do it, and I skipped through it, and I'm glad. And also, when Toothless Guy is eyeing John Voight's mouth, and he's like, has that, "You sure do got a purty mouth." And then he goes, hold the gun on him, hold the shotgun on him. And he starts, I'm like, I'm out. I can't handle this. But I got to say, there's something amazing about Lewis shooting that guy with an arrow, because when I saw this for the first time, the way that they sought Lewis up, how it subverted what my expectation was, is I thought that Lewis would fail the test, because he was kind of the blowhard. I've never been lost a day in my life, and like da-da-da-da. And it's like, okay, I know what this guy is or whatever. But at the end of the day, he came through for his friend. He came through and shot an arrow through his chest, and he did have grit. And then you're very happy to see Lewis at that moment, because he seemed to have a little bit of control over this out of control situation. Because look, at the end of the day, if you rolled up on that and you had a bow and arrow, like, your mind's going to be like, fuck, do I want to go to jail? Like, am I going to kill this guy? Like, should I beat the fuck out of this guy? Like, what's going to happen, and everything. And then
if I have a bow and arrow and I roll up and some guy's got you on the ground making you squeal like a pig, I will shoot him with an arrow. That's a problem.
Yeah, there's no question. But I will film it a little bit with the phone and then always hold it over you. Then whenever we're in an argument, I'm like, you remember that time we were on a camping trip in Chattahoochee? You remember that? I still got that photo. No, but he shot him with the arrow. Now, this is I think to me the highlight of this movie is the debate on what to do with the body. The debate on, do we go to the cops or do we bury the body? Now, what's interesting is at this time in the 70s, up into the 70s, even to the 80s, people got away with murder a lot more than they do it now, and so there's a real good opportunity. But if you think about the debate going back and forth, right, and you put yourself in it, you're like, would I advocate going to the cops, especially if I wasn't the one that shot him, or would I agree with him to bury the body because in a couple of days that whole thing is going to be flooded, so he's going to be underneath this massive lake? And that is interesting to me because it's the test of friendship, it's the test of loyalty. Also, who can keep secret, who can be quiet through that whole time, and the logic of Burt Reynolds of what he's saying really resonates with me because those local governments, those local courts, they're all going to be related.
We've talked about the power of local sheriffs, in the South in this period,
and guess what?
That being the sheriff of a county
he was right. They are related. It's his brother-in-law. Yep. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, and we've talked about that being the sheriff, the county sheriff in that period, you were like the king. You were like the king of that county. So there is a genuine threat there that like a guy who has absolute dictatorial power over this little county is going to be the guy who decides your fate.
Yeah. And so
now that would be scary. Normally you would just go to the cops. Like the worst thing you can do if you kill somebody is try to cover it up. People don't get caught for murder. People get caught for cover-ups. Right. So you call the cops, you call a lawyer, you go through the system. That's how you don't wind up in jail.
Right.
In the 70s in the South, where you've just shot the sheriff's brother-in-law with an arrow, I don't think that's true anymore.
No, and that
I think you got a problem now.
That's what fascinates me about this situation, because if that movie would have took place today, you'd be like, you go to the fucking cops. You can go on Instagram or TikTok and be like, hey, this guy butt raped my friend and I had to kill him because it was Ty got butt raped and I had to kill him, and people would be like, I get it.
No, in this scenario, you're the piggy. I'm the guy with the bow.
No, I'm the guy with the bow. There's no question. And so
I think everybody would agree that I am the Burt Reynolds in this relationship. I think everybody would agree you're the Ned Beatty.
You're the Burt Reynolds. I'm the Ned Beatty. Oh, so this situation fascinates me because you were in this backwoods county, and they are all related. They probably would have killed him if they would have came out and talked the body to him. They probably would have killed him, and they would have disappeared in the thing.
Yeah, so they would be the ones buried under the river.
Right. So the fear and the danger of these guys doing butt stuff out of the woods and all that, and then on top of that, you're like, we can't go to the cops, so we gotta find a way to get through this and beat this, and that is that's a fascinating situation, and that's a great dramatic situation in the scene, and I love the idea they made. Oh, and here's another thing I want to point out in this movie is what I didn't realize until reading about it today is Burt Reynolds was, I don't want to say a nobody. He was just a working act. Like, he was not known before this movie.
He had done a lot of TV stuff. In fact, some of the Leonardo DiCaprio character in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is based on Burt Reynolds.
Yeah.
Like the scene where he's in an episode of FBI and they face replace him to be in the episode.
Right.
The person they face replaced was Burt Reynolds.
Yeah.
That was Burt Reynolds. So he was that guy. He was the guy who was in TV shows.
Yeah.
He was like one episode guy.
He would have been Leonardo DiCaprio if he didn't get Deliverance.
Yes. I agree. Yep.
And what's interesting is he had one show where he was a title character, but other than that, he was just a working actor, and so this was the thing. Jon Voight had only done Urban Cowboy of note up to that point, and to be fair, Urban Cowboy was a gigantic hit. It was a gigantic hit, but he didn't have great follow-ups afterwards, so his career was stone cold at that point.
Right.
All right, Ronnie Cox and Ned Beatty haven't done a movie up to that point. This is Ned Beatty's first movie.
Wow.
And Ronnie Cox.
That's amazing. I didn't realize that. And Ronnie Cox. Ronnie Cox is a legend.
He's a legend. I did not like him in this movie. But I do love him in RoboCop and the things he's done since then.
Yeah. I was gonna say, like, he's fucking amazing in RoboCop.
He's so good in RoboCop. He's a fucking great actor. I didn't like him in this movie. Is this another one of your goddamn games? Somebody is dead. You killed somebody. Man, I hate these thin walls. It's really putting a hamper on my performances. And then there's an interesting shift within this because now they're hauling ass to get out of there. They rush through the rapids, and Ronnie Cox. Now, there's a big debate within this. Some people think that Ronnie Cox was shot out of the boat, but John Borman says that he had just had a nervous breakdown and just threw himself out of the boat and like basically killed himself.
Really?
Yeah.
Is that what Borman says?
Yeah, and then there's a whole thing. There's a whole debate online. Like if you go online and be like, what really happened?
I had always thought he was shot.
I always think he's shot, and I think it's better if he's shot. Because, like, why wait to that moment to have maybe the rapids were too much for him and he has that nervous breakdown. But I think being shot is more interesting because it slingshots John Voight to being like, have to climb that fucking cliff. Right?
Yeah,
because
exactly.
If he decides to kill himself, how do they know there's a guy up there? You know? And so I do think Borman is kind of leaning into that, like, artistic interpretation or being vague for whatever reason.
It doesn't match my understanding of the psychology of that sort of thing. I mean, people almost never have a breakdown in the moment of stress. It's afterwards. So in the moment of stress, you're pumped full of adrenaline and other and stress hormones and all that stuff. Your body's running at a 200%. Like, yeah, you got a lot of shit going on, but it's afterwards when all that stuff flushes out of your system and you're left with the mental trauma, but without the drugs.
Right.
That's when you have breakdowns.
Right.
You don't have breakdowns in the moment. That's almost never happens.
Yeah. Yeah. It doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense to me either. I like the scene, even for the plot, it doesn't make sense.
Right.
Like what you said, like Voight climbing up there. Why is he climbing up there if it wasn't a shot? Like it, yeah, I don't get it.
So Voight, who admired and looked up to Lewis, has to become Lewis in this moment. And part of the thing he has to do is climb that cliff. Now, what's great about that is it actually was John Voight climbing that cliff. And this was not a situation where they had like expert rock climbers that had him harnessed in and shit. It was kind of like a group of filmmakers and an actor being like, well, maybe we'll just go up here. Can you figure out how to go up here? We'll try. This doesn't work. All right, let's try this cliff. All right, this. Oh, you know what? If you get up here, this would be a good shot. And there's scenes where he's fucking up there. Like he's, like, and what's interesting is the scale of this movie and the danger in this movie is small. Like those, we've seen movies with way more intense rapids. You have the safety of movie magic when you're watching, right? This movie, it's like, no, John Voight could fall and break his neck on this thing like this, and you see him just clinging to the fucking thing, and he's petrified, and that's real. It's like in the beginning when Burt Reynolds is driving with John Voight in that Scout, that beautiful Scout. God, I'd love to have that today. But he's driving him in that Scout, and he's fucking hauling ass through the woods. Well, Borman is like, Burt Reynolds was a stunt driver, and he's like scared the shit out of Voight because Voight is, he's an actor, theater guy, like he's tender. And so when he was like, God damn it, stop, like, he goes, you're going to kill me. He was really scared in that scene, that they were really, he was like, if you wreck the car, we'll get a new car. Just fucking, haul ass there, which was great. So anyway, he climbs up this cliff and he becomes Lewis. And then there's that moment when he pulls back the bow and he sees the guy over. And that's a really chilling scene when you see him and he's waking up and then the guy walks behind him and he's looking over the cliff and he's looking for them with his rifle, and then he pulls back the bow, which contrasts that initial image of him trying to shoot the deer and he can't shoot the deer, and he pulls back the bow and he's shaking. I think he goes a little bit over the top with the shaking, but he still is shaking. The guy turns around, points the gun, lets the arrow fly. He comes over and he lands, and this is another confusing thing for me. So at first, when he sees the guy has all his teeth and he looks a little bit different. And he doesn't know if he killed the guy that was going to mouth rape him or if he killed just a bystander. And then he goes to his mouth and pulls the guy's teeth out. But then he falls on an arrow that like he impales himself on it. They lower him down. And then I think the most terrifying image is when they find Ronnie Cox with his arm wrapped like Jim Carrey style, like wrapped around his fucking head, like in the thing. And, you know, and that to me raises the stakes because it's one thing like to show up with your people and there's somebody there, but to lose Ronnie Cox, like they got to explain that to the family, you know,
right.
And have that thing. And they just bury him in the river. They go back. And what is great about this scene when they get back and they meet the sheriffs is that you realize that Lewis was right. That they are related and that these sheriffs don't trust them and they know something happened. And, you know, you think, oh, they would have fucking killed them if they would have went to the police. So they were right to do what they did in that situation.
Yeah. I mean, it did cost them a friend, but yeah,
I mean, they weren't that close with him. He wasn't that, he was not, I mean, he wasn't that cool to hang.
He was going to, at some point in the future, become the leader of OCP, and they're an evil company. So. This is an alternate universe where OCP never happened because Ronnie Cox got killed.
Yeah, and then, you know, but it's interesting, like the imagery of the dying town, like they're leaving and they're putting the church on blocks and they're moving out of the way, and the water's slowly coming up and flooding, and they know that their secrets are going to be buried in that water. But here's what's a mystery to me is that Georgia tourism like exploded after this. So I'm like, who the fuck saw this movie? It was like, that's where I want to go. Sorry, kids, we're not going to Florida. We're going to
at some point you have to question if they're there for the hunting. You know, I don't think he's here for the hunting anymore.
There's some people that are just like, oh, I'm in the woods by myself. I'm a city guy all by myself.
You gotta wonder.
Yeah, you gotta wonder. And then, you know, I think what's interesting about this movie, which I think would not play today, is like if you watch it, the rhythm is a little bit. We're so used to the rhythms of a horror movie because they take a long time to build the characters to get you comfortable with them. It feels like a buddy trip movie before the horror happens, and then the ending they let unfold. They let you decompress and really contemplate and ponder what life is going to be like for these guys after. And there is,
I mean, that's a very 70s pace though.
Yeah.
I mean, if like most of the movies from the 70s that I have a vivid memory of anyway, have that sort of gentle pace to them. I think people were less impatient. I think audiences now, if you go to see a horror movie, if there hasn't been a scene of horror or a kill within the first 10 minutes, everybody's like, well, is this even a horror movie? What's going on? There's no patience to the audience. I think there was a lot more patience in the 70s, letting the film sort of develop at its own pace.
All right, then they head on out. What do you think old Ned Beatty's life's going to be like? So look, if
I think Ned Beatty needs to go see a doctor.
Well, look, I think if this movie happened in this day and age, he would find a support group. He would get therapy. He would, but this is the 70s. So what's going to happen? He's going to bury himself in alcohol. He's going to stop connecting to his wife and his family. He's going to become abusive, trying to reclaim his manhood and violence through his.
The 70s.
And he's going to have multiple affairs, and then he's going to die lonely, bitter, and sad. So
and drunk
and
yellow from liver necrosis and
Okay, Joseph, what's our top 5?
Well, we have top 5 most horrifying scenes. Let me get the
most horrifying scenes. That's a pretty broad topic.
Yeah, I know. Well, it's in the vein of Squeal Like a Pig
or Terrorizing scenes. You know what's interesting is that scene in this movie, I don't think that you and I would be having a conversation about Deliverance, or it would be half the movie if it wasn't for that scene. But that scene is.
I think that is a very famous scene for a reason. Yeah.
Yeah. And even now, like the way that scene unfolds, the way that it behaves, the how long the aftermath is, and the noises, and holding on John Voight's face. For me, there's nothing that affects me or disturbs me as much as that scene right there.
Because it's disturbing and affecting. And like I said, anybody, if I ever meet somebody who enjoys that scene, I'm going to call the police. Because that person's probably a serial killer.
Right. Joseph, what do you think about that? What do you think about that scene? Was there any ear stuff in that scene?
I've seen Deliverance once, and I guess since I heard about it so much that I was like, I already knew it was going to come, so I was like already desensitized to it. I mean, yeah, it was definitely messed up. I guess it didn't have the shock value.
It's going to be tough to kind of nail down this category, because if I think about the if I think about the thing in the defibrillator scene, I think that's the most compelling scene, one of the most intriguing scenes and surprising scenes.
Yeah, it's surprising.
Yeah,
it's surprising.
But the chest burster, I think, is definitely in there. I think that's because that horrified me.
Again, though, the chest burster is surprising. I mean, if we're talking about terrorizing,
well, the chest burster is terrorizing. It's a terrifying.
Well, no, it's not. No, it's terrifying, but it's not terrorizing. The alien isn't bursting out of his John Hurt's chest to frighten him, to deliberately frighten him.
But
terrorizing to me.
Us. It frightens.
Yes,
the
but
people watching it.
When I'm thinking of terrorizing is when one person does something horrible to another person for the specific purpose of dehumanizing and terrorizing them. That's different. And I think that's what we're talking about with this scene. What's happening here isn't that they're killing Ned Beatty because that's their nature, which is what the alien's doing. What we're talking about here is one human being treating another human being in a way that's specifically designed to dehumanize and terrorize him. But that feels different to me.
But if he would have
like the ones on this list that Joseph put up, that
no. Let me comment to that. I understand what you're saying, and I agree with you saying about the chest bursting scene. But one can die in that scene and still be terrorized by it.
Whereas, no, I agree. It doesn't. You don't have to live through it.
Yeah, like the Nazi slowly stabbing the.
Yes,
and also I think too is like the impact it has on us, the audience watching it. You know, the things that terrorize us.
For me, the ones on this list that like Misery when she hobbles. James Caan.
God damn, that scene.
Is. It's brutal. It's unflinching. We watch it happening. We see. I think part of what you need for a scene to be terrorizing is the person who's being harmed or terrorized has to know what's going on. Has to see it. It can't be a surprise to them. Like the thing with the scene with Ned Beatty is he knows exactly what's happening to him and he's powerless to stop it.
Mm-hmm.
The scene with James Caan in Misery is he knows what she's going to do. She slowly puts the block of wood there. She's tied him up. She gets the hammer. She's telling him about the process of hobbling. He knows what's about to happen, and he's powerless to stop it. For me, that is the essence of a scene like this.
Yeah, you know,
is awareness and powerlessness.
In the book, she cuts his feet off with an axe.
Yes.
I think
only one of them, though. I think she cuts one foot off.
I think breaking his ankles the way they do, something about it seems more terrifying.
It's horrifying.
It's horrifying.
Yeah, it's horrifying.
And it's interesting because it's almost like if they cut your legs off, then you're just like, fuck it, I'm done, you know? But if they break, like there's something more horrifying in that.
Right. And for me, another one that fits this is, and I don't know if you've seen this movie, but Bone Tomahawk. When they drag the guy in, tear his clothes off, hang him upside down. Like, that guy knows what's going to happen to him. He knows what's about to happen. And there's nothing he can do to stop it. And the people watching know what's going to happen. And there's nothing they can do to stop it. It may be one of the most horrifying scenes I've ever seen in film, is that scene.
Yeah. That movie's like, that is such a unique...
That movie's fucked up, dude.
That movie's so fucked up. And it's so unique and so bizarre. And
The scene for me that the other one for me that really fits this category well is the scene in Audition where she defoots him with the wire. Maybe one of the most horrifying things I've ever watched. It's so slow motion. I mean, it's so like it's so methodical and deliberate, and there's nothing he can do about it, and he's just has to watch it happening. Oh my God.
A scene that, and this might not count because I think it might have been stolen from Deliverance. Pulp Fiction, when Mr. Marcellus Wallace is like, got the,
oh my God.
Like, oh my God. That whole, like the whole foreplay of it, like the guy coming out in the gimp suit.
Yeah,
like,
I agree. I agree.
It fucked.
When he brings out the gimp.
Oh my God. When he brings out the gimp, it's so horrifying to me. And
it's so horrifying.
And then when you hold on Bruce Willis, his face.
And you don't see any of the actual sexual assault. So I think that's, for me, that's what makes that scene okay, is that you don't see it, right? Mm-hmm. It's not, the camera's not lingering on the abuse as it's happening. You're just getting everybody else's reaction to it. You're getting the weird giggling that the gimp is doing, and Bruce Willis's look of horror looking at the door, and the sounds that are coming through the door, all of that.
But but the noise from it and the laughter from the gimp, that's terrorizing me. I mean, that's horrifying.
Oh yeah, it absolutely
because what's happening in your imagination it might be worse.
I think what's happening in your imagination is worse.
Yeah. Oh God, that movie, that scene is like fuck. But I definitely think he was inspired by Deliverance for that thing.
Yeah, I'm sure he was. I mean, that's Quentin Tarantino's shtick, is he takes stuff from the movies that.
But I think he took it further.
Mattered to him when he was a kid and redoes them. Yeah.
But I think he took it further because of the slow build to that moment, and then the dude in the gimp suit when it comes out, I was like, oh my God.
Anytime any movie that has a scene of a slave being whipped by a white person is incredibly uncomfortable. I was a little kid when Roots was on TV, and that fucked with my head. There are a few things worse in the world than slavery, and so that definitely is at the top of my list for stuff that freaks me out. But I don't know that I would put it on this particular list.
Do we have 5?
No, we only have 4. I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's been a while since I've seen Marathon Man, but I remember when he's drilling into his teeth scene being incredibly uncomfortable, incredibly hard to watch. And that's another movie that I think is like a gem from the past. That's a Goldman, right?
The Saving Private Ryan really fucked me up. That was heartbreaking to me.
The slow stabbing?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know that it exactly matches my feeling of because he's not slowly stabbing because he wants him to be scared. He's slowly stabbing him because they're fighting, but watching it is fucking terrorizing. Yeah,
so you're saying it needs to terrorize the person in the scene, or it terrorizes us watching it?
For me, this category is about intention.
Mm-hmm.
Are you intending to terrorize the person by your action?
Yeah, that's a good clarification.
For me, that's what it is.
Yeah, that's a good clarification.
So, Marathon Man, then?
The original Old Boy is pretty fucked up. You ever see Old Boy, the Korean Old Boy?
I haven't seen it, no. Everybody tells me to watch it. Yeah, Marathon Man, that dental work's fucked up. Yeah, I'll go with that. Okay. So, thank you guys for hanging out on this rough journey we had. I'm sure we should have Daniel back to talk about more nice philosophical stuff. Philosophy.
Yep. But I do know now, and this is something I was worried about, so I'm glad I got clarification, that when I tie you up and torture you, you would rather have me cut your foot off than break it with a hammer.
Yes.
So now I know what's going to work better on you.
I'd rather do that, because then it's like, then you can just be hopeless. I will say, I want to stand up for Georgia, and I want to stand up for North Georgia. You can go to Georgia, and you can have a great time on the Chattahoochee River or whatever river. There's many rivers, many lakes, and you don't have to worry about butt stuff, because that doesn't happen anymore. You can go to Georgia
unless you wanted to.
Unless you wanted to. There's places for that too.
There's plenty of people who are,
But your butt is safe in Georgia if you want to go on camping trips. And that's my public service announcements for the state of Georgia. Say goodbye, Ty.
Goodbye, Ty.